Hello everyone, this is Ben, that guy with the French accent, and today I come to you with a topic that was actually brought up by Eric Tenkar of Tenkar's Tavern, dear friend of mine, and he was talking about the OSR and how the OSR is not actually what we remember from back in the day. And this is a topic that, as if, that was some type of flow of the OSR or something like that. Now, for those who don't know, the OSR stands for Old School Renaissance. This is a kind of niche inside the role-playing game, tabletop role-playing game hobby that aims at bringing back the old tabletop games from the 70s and 80s, particularly under the aegis of the open game license today. I made a video about this that I will link in the description, and so if you're curious about this, you can check it out. Now that's out of the way, that video puzzled me a great deal because, to me, I've always been a kind of irked at the idea that old school anything is about nostalgia. The rose-colored glasses. Oh, you don't remember correctly the game, so you're kind of you're ideologizing, or you're changing history or whatever. And that's the kind of stuff that's usually said. I know that Eric didn't mean that, but that's usually brought up to dismiss some critique or some commentary on role-playing games today. And the thing is, to me, I don't play OSR games because I want to go back to the long-lost days. I want to play OSR games now, and I enjoy them now with the intellect I have today, the age, the maturity I have today, the tools I have today, and all the means that were not available way back then, right? When I started playing, now I was lucky because Eric was asking how many people have ever run an X scroll, with hexes in the wilderness, or a real sandboxy game. I was very lucky that way because I was introduced to Dungeons and Dragons when I was 11 years old by a cousin of mine who was much older and had learned the way to play the game in a very traditional way. So I started playing solo characters, literally around the village of Hamlet, exploring the wilderness, and killed many of my characters until one made it to level 2, and so on. That's a story for another time. But I did experience that village, wilderness, dungeon kind of setup, open game setup that I describe in my videos, right? So this is something I was lucky with. Where I was unfortunate is that, unfortunate in a manner of speaking, is that after that, I started running games, and the same cousin gave me the Schwarze Auge, Dark Eye, role-playing game from Germany, in French, translated in French. And I started running that. And later on, I almost immediately went for more complex role-playing games, namely Stormbringer, Hawkmoon, RuneQuest, right? One thing I was not able to do back in the day was to make all the French kids that were coming to my table and I was introducing to role-playing games. I could not make them play Dungeons and Dragons because in France at the time, and we're talking, around the turn, the early late 80s, early 90s, the reputation of Dungeons and Dragons in role-playing game circles was that it was the first role-playing game, but it had elements of war games and the alignments and all sorts of things that were kind of like a proto role-playing game. It was not a real role-playing game, like the real French games. And the real games like RuneQuest, Call of Cthulhu, where there's this real role-play. Of course, it's all bollocks, but okay. At the time, people believed that. And somehow, the people I introduced to the games myself immediately fell for that idea that Dungeons and Dragons is not a real role-playing. We prefer, Ben, can't you run instead Vampire the Masquerade? This is a real role-playing game, you know? And so, my real return to Dungeons and Dragons was much later with 3rd edition. And then, after getting a few campaigns off the ground and liking the game really, but finding it in many ways too complex, too changing the characters' levels felt like filing taxes to me, and I hated this. The amount of homework, purely mechanical, was silly. That I felt like I could use that time for imaginary purposes and to come up with future scenarios instead. So, after a hiatus, I ended up going through Castles and Crusades, which really was a boon to me at the time. And afterwards, I came to wonder, hey, I actually haven't experimented with the original game of 1974. What if I did do that too? And I started reading in depth the original game of 1974. Now we're in 2005, 4, 5, 6, something like that. 2006. And that's where I had really an epiphany, because reading the original game of 1974, I realized that there were parts of the 1st edition AD&D game that I knew well that didn't make sense, or had a renewed sense with the context that the original game of 1974, the 3 little booklets, was providing. That context include these elements include things like the scale of levels in the world, the level limits, tons of little bits like that. And that brought me all the way full circles to get back to dungeoneering full on. And that's how ultimately I was noticed by the Guy Gaxlan, first by Luke, then by Yorny, Rob Kuntz, and others. Alright, so now, the reason I don't think the OSR is about nostalgia at all. It's about finding an interesting value in the old games that somehow has been discarded in recent years, in recent designs. So, for a guy like me, that's to bring these old designs, these old games in the present, enjoy them now, have a good time with them now, and then either I can, with one game, I can just enjoy the no rulings, not rules, and interpret on the spot, filling the blanks and all that. And in other cases, I could say, hey, there are blanks here that I could fill with new ideas that haven't been explored before, or that have been explored in some recent design, in some other role-playing game, but didn't exist back in the 70s or 80s. And I could create some new thing to enjoy. This is how you get games like I forget the name of the narrative dungeon game. There are a bunch of those anyway. But narrative role playing game is kind of an artifact of the post 2000 hobby. And now you got people that mix them up and create new games like this, right? And that's not a bad thing. That's not especially for me, because I don't appreciate, like, I don't have the same fun playing narrative games as I do traditional immersive games. But if that's the jam of other people, why not? Is that OSR or not OSR? Technically, I would say, like back on my video, if it's derived from the OGL, the Open Game License, technically it is. So there are plenty of different playstyles and ways to explore the OSR nowadays. And I don't think that we, the old guys, I don't think we own the OSR because we have some nostalgia. We were there back in the day, and you see what I mean? Like, we don't own this thing. When we are dead, I hope there will still be an OSR played by our children, grandchildren, nephews, and the people we've played with who are young and we introduced the game to, and they found them fun too. And they will hopefully create their own games with it, and the tradition will carry on like this. That would be great. Maybe that will not happen, maybe it will. I hope it will. I'm working towards that personally. So, no, I really, as much as, we can say, yeah, well, back in the day, that didn't work exactly like this, blah, blah, blah. First, back in the day, the player base was concentrated much more than now. There were less role-playing games to play with. So many more playstyles were included in the D&D crowd. So your way to play in 1979 and 1983 might not be the way the people were playing in the town nearby or on the other coast. That's already a faulty assumption. And now, it's not because people play the same way that we can't rediscover the games, and play them in new ways now. Or discover that some games were by and large misinterpreted for decades, and now we find some new ways that were actually right there on the page, and we just are more mature to or discerning to find out what those were. That's the case with a lot with first edition AD&D, because when you were 12 years old reading the Dungeon Master's Guide, to read High Gygaxian the way Gary Gygax was writing, I'm sure a lot of kids just jumped paragraphs and just used the tables and figured it out based on other role-playing games they played or the people they played with previously. So that wouldn't surprise me if plenty of people didn't experience the AD&D game first edition as it was written in the Dungeon Master's Guide, as it was explained how to play. But that doesn't mean that you can't play that now. Not that we can, decipher Gygaxian as 40 years old or 50 years old people. So, the whole idea that the OSR is somehow lesser or discredited, or there is a problem with the OSR because that wouldn't be the way it was played back in the day. I don't see the issue here. I really don't. And I hope we keep on discovering new ways to play the games of looking forward. And that's basically my take about it. Now, what do you think about this? Do you think that the OSR suffers from not replaying the game exactly like we played them as kids in the 70s and 80s? Do you think that the OSR is defined differently? What do you think about this topic? Let me know in the comment section. And if you like what you see, please like and share. Don't forget to subscribe. And I'll see you next time. Bye bye.